Good afternoon, everybody. We've just finished a nice lunch together. We're moving on with our presentations. We have BRYAN ADERHOLD, GGGIA, FGA of NASH JAMESENTERPRISES, and Joe MENZIE of Joseph MENZIE Inc. in New York. And they're going to talk to you about the ruby and sapphire market and give you a thorough update on that. Again, my pleasure to introduce again BRYAN and Joe. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you, Howard, and to my peers. Thanks for some of the great speeches and what you've told us so far. And this is more for retailers. So this will be a two-part series for BRYAN and myself. And BRYAN works under a banner of his own company, NASH James, and we're roommates in an office, and he has his company, I have my company. And he's a global supplier for ruby sapphire that helps my company out quite a bit, so he'll be taking over from top to bottom to talk about ruby and sapphire in an organized method that you'll understand as soon as we get there. My thing is that I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the retailers out there. We'll be on a new endeavor that I'm doing, started about 2 years ago, where I take people on gemstone expeditions to the markets where gemstones are found. And I was fortunate enough through my years, as many of the people in the room have talked so far, of going to places all over the world where gemstones are mined and come from. In those episodes, we were very lucky to understand the culture, the history, the cuisine, the politics of our products and where they came from. And I thought, when I was involved with an association, International Colored Gemstone Association, I did this for a lot of the gemstone dealers around the world. I would bring them to the different mines. And I was a little shocked at how many people really don't ever get a chance to go to where the mines are. We sometimes go to cutting centers, we buy our products from there, Thailand, Jaipur, Brazil, Belo Horizonte. But you don't really go to see the mines. And I thought this was terribly interesting from the standpoint of all about passion and telling the story about the people and the culture where these fabulous gems come from. And some of the people in the room here, Monty Zychek, went with me in Bogota, Colombia, to Muzo and the Chavor mine. People just don't ever get a chance to see these things. So that's my thing right now. And as I hand off, what I do is sell ruby and sapphire, obviously, in New York, and I've been at the business since 1973. So I don't know how many years, but it's a lot of years, I guess. Older than you are, Monty, huh? And so the other thing is, coming up to next year, I'm going to merge, or my company will merge with BRYAN's company, NASH James. And my company will hand off to BRYAN's company, and you'll still have two separate companies doing the same thing, servicing all the people the way they have been up to the standards we both had. So on the gemstone trips and tours, I thought what was also very interesting was to bring I thought this could be a learning experience for the retailer and the manufacturer, or just for people in general. You have so much information's being sent at you from all different methods today, that a first-hand experience of where our products originated from, I thought equally as important as the products were the people and the culture that surround where the products come from. So I thought these trips could be very interesting to the retailers and the jewelers and manufacturers. They have opportunity to buy things there if they would so choose. But half the trip, I would say, was also to expand on the area itself, the culture of that area, what it's like to go from Nairobi, Kenya, down into Tanzania to Arusha. We go on a safari, I mean a really high-end safari. We go to Kilimanjaro, we go to Ngora Crater, and we stop in at all the different savarite mines, tanzanite mines. It's all part and parcel. And the same thing with places like Brazil, where you saw pictures before of Ouro Preto and the Gold City. We take people right to these places, and they see firsthand how the dredging is done, how the mining is done. Sri Lanka, we have the open pit mining, which I went with Ed Bohm one time. He went right down into the pit, I mean all the way down on a ladder, which I would never do. And you get to see firsthand where they're going down 40 feet to a little stream down there and digging and dredging. And Sri Lanka is a beautiful country, great people. So this gives everybody an idea of how and where our products come from. Along with that, and this is probably from my days as a social worker, before 1973, I was a guidance counselor in a high school, and I worked with street gangs. So part of me was always very much trying to help other people. And what we do on these trips is we find ways that we can give back to the community, as Eric was saying. We identify projects that we can do, that we have done in the past, that can help the people. We've done projects in Brazil, to a school there, a school in Muzo, we're donating computers. We built a wing on a school just outside of Arusha. So I think these are things that are to me, are very important. And the people that collaborate, which is the people on the trip, they can then participate and talk about what they have done to help support these endeavors when they get back home. We cover them with videos and pictures and things that they can use. These are the retailers or manufacturers that go. We give them all the ammunition, so when they come back home, they can put it on their social medias. In conjunction with that, I identify, and I don't see anybody in this room because of the Africa trip, we identify and help the retail jeweler identify different wholesalers in the trade that are very good with the product and mix that comes from that area. And they put on themed events, East Africa, with gemstones. So it could have been somebody like AG Color for Tanzanite. Bruce Bridges came and did an event with a store up in Lebanon that the guy came, and they were just very excited about the whole thing. So it gets them excited when they get home again to have all these pictures, videos, and then to know the people that are good in that field. And I'm not ashamed or about giving up who does what, because it builds up the whole industry. You can't do it all yourself, so you share. You can share with other people what they're great at. And I think that's important. And if I could, I'll read you a quick note from the guy who just sent it. I just got this last night. I do have an article that was in the Retail Jeweler about Lucian Lee, Hales Jewelers in Greenville. Thank you. Greensboro is another one. Greenville, South Carolina. He came on 2 trips with me, and you're more than welcome. If you want that, I'll send it out to you. This is from Ed and Helen Brackett, who came on the trip to Africa. And they were very exciting. They said it was an eye-opening experience, the opportunity to actually go into the Sapphire mine in Kenya. It was exciting to actually meet the miners down in the mine and see how they work. They visited several mines, had opportunity to talk with owners and operators, and hear their stories. You see this prevalency, hear their stories firsthand, right? In Tanzania, they saw the primitive mines of the Tanzanite mines and had the opportunity to buy both Tanzanite and Savarite. And this enabled them, with the help of Joe, to hold their own East Africa event where when they returned to their store. We now have loose and finished jewelry with wonderful stories behind them. And then he goes on, it was nice, and the people were nice, blah, blah, blah. So I think at the end of the day, it's all about, they say, tell a story, and you have to extend yourself a little bit. In a world where we don't have time for anything anymore, it seems, and we're getting flooded with so many things, you have to take a deep breath and experience something maybe a little bit out of the ordinary that you've never done before. And a trip to Sri Lanka, a trip to Myanmar, a trip to Brazil, Bogota, Sri Lanka, Australia was a great trip. Fantastic trips to make. Really experiences, and that will live on through your participation and giving back to the communities that are serviced. That's it. Thank you. And now Brian put together Brian put together the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm up here to answer when it gets into my rail of talk. So go ahead,
All right.
Brian.
Thanks, Joe. So we're just going to give a quick update on the current market in ruby and sapphire, what's going on with sources and enhancement and whatnot. Howard, could you advance the slide, please?
Yep.
So first we'll start with sapphires. This picture here shows a typical mine in Ratnapura, which is south-central Sri Lanka. There's many sources of sapphire all around the world. Some of them are listed here. Two of the strongest players, of course, are Sri Lanka and Madagascar, which, as Jameen had mentioned before, is part of this surge of African sources. Madagascar is a really prolific country when it comes to colored gemstones, and sapphires, of course, is one of the strengths. Sri Lanka, of course, is the storied source, a historical source, has been around producing colored gemstones and major sapphires for quite a long time. As we heard from Eric before, who's very involved in the Montana. Montana has been around and been producing for over 100 years, but again, with this surge in consumer interest in American-made products, we're seeing real strong interest in Montana sapphires. And the colors that they're producing, in addition to nice blues, these pastels and sort of off colors are very popular with designers and retailers alike. And the consumer is certainly looking forward to these types of colors. You don't see cashmere on this list, which everybody knows is a source of wonderful, magnificent sapphires because it's not really a producing region. Though there are neighboring deposits in that area that are starting to show some life, but not to any degree that is marketable at this time. It'll be interesting to see if some of this material comes out. It's a challenging area on many levels, both politically and environmentally. The mining of sapphire is very much is done in an artisanal fashion, as Edward had mentioned before. It's not one of the gemstones that has seen a big rise in commercial mining, like emerald has seen in Zambia and ruby in Mozambique. This is a typical mine in Sri Lanka, and you can see these types of mines peppered all around the different mining areas. This is a look down into this particular mine. As you can see, it's reinforced with wood and things just to keep it sturdy and keep it stable. One issue with mining in Sri Lanka is the seasonal rains, and that the rains come and fill up the mine with mud and water, and it often takes quite some time to empty the mine of the water and the mud, and by the time they have it clean, it rains again. So there can be extended periods of time when the mines are inoperable. Another mine that should be coming back on soon is the Capricorn mine in Australia. As we've just heard somewhat recently, the new mining company Fura has purchased the rights to that mine, and that sort of completes their trio of emerald, ruby, and sapphire. So look to see that mine producing in the near future. Sapphire treatments. Sapphire has been spared somewhat the extensive technology increases in treatments. It's heat treated, of course, in many cases, and that's done to reduce the amount of inclusions, to dissolve silk within the stone, as well as to improve the color, whether it's to lighten or to darken or to bring out different colors. This past year, there was an instance of a discovery that sapphires were heat treated, HTHP treated, high temperature, high pressure treatment. And they suppose the issue was that these stones were discovered. It wasn't necessarily declared. There was some issue with the detection of this, and it was only done out of this one location in Korea, as far as I know. And it'll be interesting to see if this type of treatment continues and how it's declared as different from normal heat-treated sapphires. With sapphire, the colors and trends of note are, of course, blue is the most important sapphire color. That's what everybody thinks of when they think of sapphire. However, today we're seeing a real strong increase in demand for what would be formerly known as the rejection colors. The off colors, the in-between colors. We're getting a lot of demand for peaches and pinks and purples and greens and even teals and bicolors. I mean, almost just as many calls for these types of colors than we are with blue sapphire. I suppose this can be attributed in large part to social media platforms such as Instagram and Etsy and Pinterest and Facebook, where a lot of this is being proliferated, and it's reaching the stores, and the stores are calling us for these types of things. So we've seen a lot of interest in that. There's also an increase in interest in untreated stones, and I think this is also part of the reality of today's consumer has access to a lot of information online. So they go online to do their research about gemstones, and they realize that stones are treated, and that instantly conjures up a feeling that, well, they don't want a treated stone, so we are seeing an interest from stores to get untreated stones, even in smaller sizes and more commercial qualities. So that's something that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, here, just go back to that just for a second. So we wanted to include in this, and it's mostly, I mean, the people in the room here that deal in unique and high-end stones understand this chart. But I put it in, or we put it in, because it's important for the retailers to understand what they might have sold, let's say 20, 30, or 50 years ago to people in their community, has now reached an apex, whereas if you take all things being equal, if you take back in '79, they sold an 11-carat cashmere for $25,000 a carat. In 2015, the same, assuming the same quality of stone, went for $243,000 a carat. Now, in 2018, that same stone could be easily over $1 million per carat today. Cashmeres, not so much Burmese, but cashmere sapphires. Just at the apex for stones between 10 or 8 to 20 carat sizes. And there were a lot of cashmeres back in the day of the 30s, 40s, because their stones were coming in through Thailand, and so they are out there. But the retailers, if they put their thinking caps on of how they could partner with companies like ours or Rare Gems or any of the people that do fine gemstones, we could help set their portfolios up for their clients to help realize the new value of these and potentially also sell them too. So it's an interesting chart of how you see this rise. And we're talking about fine, unheated cashmeres in this case. But the other stones in blue, which would be Ceylon and Burma, have also increased in price. If they're fine and unheated. If they're heated and fine, they've still gone way up in price. So of size in Sri Lanka today, when we go to buy, we're realizing the prices that we want to buy it at are the same prices that we were trying to realize to sell for here in the United States. We just don't know how our clients are going to see this new price when we come back. So there's a lot of reticence. And the Sri Lankans, like the Thais, there's so many people going there now to buy, unperturbed about the price. The Chinese especially, and other markets that are flush with money, they come in and they buy. And Americans, we go over and we're trying to negotiate a price, They don't have the time for us anymore. They can sell fast.
What percentage of the increase from 79 to 15 on the per carat comes from the larger size, 2768 versus 1181?
Say that again. From 2000, from 79, which is 21 and 20, it's 41 years ago. Let's say on a smaller size stone, let's say a 5-carat stone back in 79, cashmere sapphire, probably sold for somewhere around, I would say, 10 to 12,000 a carat. And today, that same 5-carat stone is going for 75 to 90,000 a carat. in a 4 to 5 carat size fine gemstone. Selling price from the wholesale end to a retail store on a memo demand basis. You get into these bigger sizes, and these are all benchmarks of different auction houses. So we understand the prices pretty well on these high-end. We do, the trade does, the retailers don't. So now we'll move into ruby. Is there any questions on sapphire pricing? But it's true what Brian was saying, and what also Eric. The stones that we were junk, we thought were junk years ago. We would put them, we just almost throw them in the garbage. They're off-color, green, yellow. Now these things are so popular, going for the same amounts as blue sapphires, 1 and 2 and 3 carat sizes. It's incredible. You know, when I look at it now, I think of all the stuff that we had in our garbage. Like, where is that been? We threw it away. It wasn't worth anything. Now they're coming back. So.
Is this an American trend, or is the China market going?
No, I think I would put this more. I know the Chinese market on sapphire is against words like cornflower, royal blue, vivid blue. They're using this vocabulary to capture those top colors. So they can't even say cornflower, but if a cert says cornflower, they say, oh, they want to buy it. Doesn't matter the quality, it's cornflower. So anyway, that's not the color the Chinese are after. There's greens and yellows and things. It's an American created thing here for the most part that I'm aware of. Go ahead.
All right, well, moving on to ruby. Of course, there's many sources for ruby. It always amazes me when new finds come along, and in the last 10 years ago, approximately, when the Mozambique deposit came to be, it really was an explosion of ruby product to come out. It doesn't hurt that the company producing these was a big mining company, Gemfields, and they have the equipment and wherewithal to really pull the goods out, but it's been certainly an explosion of material. Unfortunately for us, that doesn't necessarily mean that the prices have come down. In fact, just the opposite has happened, and the prices continue to surge at the auctions and at the market level for cut stones. Plenty of other sources for ruby. One of interest would be the New Greenland deposit. It'll be interesting to see what type of material comes out as time goes forward, if more gem quality material comes, and what type of production comes out of there.
Yeah, I would say mostly in Greenland right now, from what we see, is a lot of cabochons, stones, not a big size, faceted, but smaller sizes. Haley Henning, Greenland Ruby, is spearheading that movement, and she's doing a great job of bringing the Greenland Ruby to market in a sustainable way, much like what Eric does, and we wish her well. It's going to find its roots. It's all about the story, like Eric was saying, and they've got a good story to tell. So, plus it's ruby from Greenland.
Here's a picture of the Gemfields Montepuez mine. As you can see, it's large-scale mining taking place. As Edward had mentioned before, 20% of colored gemstones are large-scale. This would certainly be part of that contingency. And this is a picture of, what the rough is starting, looking like. And when it comes to treatments, rubies are not so uncomplicated. There's a lot of different things happening with ruby and ruby treatments. Of course, the traditional methods of heating still exist, as you can see, the gentleman doing the old blowpipe method. But we also have advanced heating techniques, and of course, the reason to heat rubies is to alter the color, to remove dark cores in certain origins of rubies, to dissolve silk, to make cleaner stones. But then we also have residues being used in the heating process to help heal the fractures. And this is now being indicated on laboratory reports, similar to the language used on emerald clarity enhancement reports. Minor amount of residues, moderate amount of residues within the fractures.
Let me interject one thing. The picture on the upper right-hand side there.
Glass.
That would be well, actually, it's a glass-filled ruby. But before that you see all the lines and the matrix in there, those are all cracks and everything going through. But what that looks like before it's even that red like that, sort of orange or red, it's brown. It looks like gravel in your driveway. You wouldn't even pick it up. This is what they had. This is what they had laying on the ground all over the place. And they learned how to heat it, but at a very lower temperature. So it wouldn't explode the stone as usually the heat treatments on regular rubies and sapphires are 1900, 2000. This was much lower and at a lower heat level. And it changed the color to red, but at the same time opened up everything inside. So what they did at that time was they infused lead glass into the process, and basically it fused the stone together. So all those white things there would have lead, or they were connected. There was almost as much epoxy in there as ruby, in a sense, and they called it composite ruby or lead glass ruby. You know, the stones sell for very little because they're so common. The supply side is so strong and so long. They're not really. We don't like to sell those. But if you sell them, you sell it for what it is, a lead glass ruby, not like the similar heated ruby. And it fits a niche area for people that want red but can't afford a natural heated ruby. So.
Yeah, they sell at a steep discount, of course. Very steep discount. One other enhancement we have now with rubies is clarity enhancement. Oiling, just like with emerald, is being done on some rubies, not to any real strong, extensive amount, but you will see that on the lab reports. Standard enhancement is heat, secondary enhancement, clarity. And with ruby, as far as colors and trends, you know, obviously because ruby is a much more narrow color range, we do have, you know, pinkish reds, true reds, and then vivid reds. Vivid reds also being coined pigeon blood color, which is very much in demand by consumers.
So go back to that slide again. So the reason I thought to put this slide in, or I encouraged Brian to put it in, because the word pigeon blood or vivid red conjures up many things to many people. I kid accounts on the phone when they say pigeon blood. I say, is it New York pigeon or a West Coast pigeon? They really think about that, like I'm serious. But the actual color is a very strong red with sort of a darkish overtone that makes it more saturated, deeper red. If it goes too dark, it becomes what we call over color. We don't like those. But if it's under that super deep color red, like let's put it more in the side of a fire engine red, like the middle one there. It's not quite fire engine, but it definitely doesn't have that masking darkness over it. So what the reports are coming out with, some reports like GRS and some even the higher end ones will allude to a color similar to or alike or akin to pigeon blood color, they call it. Some will say it on the face of the certificate, some will put it in their footnotes as an addendum to the stone, if it's an important stone. But I thought for your sake, for just to show people what a really good pigeon blood red would be, that's the stone on the right. Then you move over to the left and you get into things like a pink sapphire, or is it a ruby? And that's a defining line that's hard to differentiate, even sometimes to labs. We don't have a crisp cutoff, but you know, so in a sense it really doesn't matter, because a pink sapphire that's so close to being a ruby, or is it a pink sapphire, still is the same price. It doesn't really matter if they call it pink sapphire or they call it pink ruby or just ruby. So, but there's not a fine line, but I thought the interesting part was on what the trend is. What the trend is for people, because they hear this word pigeon blood, and they say, that's what I want a pigeon blood. So that's the color of pigeon blood. And the prices are steep, as you can see. Probably, this will astound you. Let me see. We have a 4-carat stone in, what is that? 79, that was 100,000 a carat. A 6-carat stone in 2012. These are Burmese now. not Mozambiques. Burmese in 2012 sold for $554,000. 15-carat stone in 2015, $1.2 million per carat. Now I can tell you that in Bangkok today, this is on a wholesale level, to try to find let's assume an 8 to 12 carat Mozambique ruby, akin to what a Burmese pigeon blood ruby looks like, cost the trade, the wholesalers, over $150,000 per carat, African ruby. So that's moving up now too, very dramatically in price. And these are world record auction prices. So again, if you have clients out there that you've sold ruby to in the last 30 or 40 years from your father, in your location, talk to Ed about what the value of that is today. And maybe that estate will think about marking the goods and set up their probate and estates and set it up maybe for sale or at least reprice it. And that gives you an opportunity as to see what was out there years ago. Because you know who your father sold to or your grandfather sold to in your communities. And if you reach out just to talk to them about an update on pricing, because pricing on probate and wills usually has a basis point. So if you bring the basis point up to a new certificate, then you have different types of tax liabilities, and you can save them money, or they might try to liquidate, and it's easier to split a 10-carat ruby up in cash than to chop it into 5 pieces for your kids, right? You don't get the exact same value is what I'm indicating. All right? Anyway, any questions on this, pricing? On the wholesale side, I can't tell you, and the guys that work with ruby, we're flabbergasted at the new prices of how fast they've moved up when we look at a stone. We look at something and somebody might say, oh, it's 50,000 a carat. And you're looking at the stone and say, wow, last year this was only 20,000 a carat. Oh, 50,000 a carat now. So you try to check that and you go to your friends and other friends and sure enough, 50, 60,000 a carat. It sets new benchmarks then. We all follow each other. So the prices on the wholesale side have increased exponentially, I would say. Edward, would you? On ruby and other stones too. Anything very fine, unique, rare, gone way up.
No, that's all. Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions at all?
Brian, you mentioned the Capricorn mine in Australia. What more do you know about that?
I don't know a whole lot. I just know that the Furum people have purchased the rights to that mine, and hopefully their production would be starting soon, and we'll get to see some merchandise coming there.
Will it be mostly the typical over dark material that?
You know.
Maybe Eric knows.
Eric knows.
We set up the heat treating for that mine 20 years ago. It's a difficult mine to work. There are about 200 meters, or no, about 80 meters of overburden right now. It's going to be difficult. Almost none of it goes to a good blue. Maybe 10%. The rest will definitely have a gray or teal overtone. And then fancies, though, they have great fancies in my colors.
Right.
So yellows.
That could be
Yellows,
hot
right.
now, though. You know what?
Absolutely, yeah.
It is hot because
So-
those colors weren't interesting.
20 years ago, they ended up closing the mine because it was not profitable because too much overburden. Today, it would be real interesting to see how that develops, but it is extremely difficult to heat treat. So, and the whole system that we set up in the ovens and everything seemed to have disappeared in Australia somewhere. I don't know where they are.
Well, this group seems to have the financing to be able to push forward, so likely they'll give it their best shot, and especially now with these teals and yellows and off colors being so popular, maybe the time is right to explore it.
Let me add one little plug, because I probably didn't mention it. If you're interested in going any of the gemstone tours that everybody's spoken about in here, or the places where our gems come from, all you have to do is go to gemstoneexpeditions.com, and you're in. Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much.